feel. I'll tell you that right now. I am time warped from the West Coast, 3 hours. And plus the reality is I'm not really a morning person. You know, some woman said, Mr. Koukl, you must have a great quiet time in the morning. I said, frankly, ma'am, before my first cup of coffee, I'm an atheist. But I had some coffee there. It was like 15 minutes ago. So right now I'm a Jehovah's Witness. But, you know, I'm still working on it. Probably second service I'll be in good shape here. But I have been a follower of Christ for 48 years. I didn't grow up as a Christian. I was kind of in a Christian kind of denomination, but nobody in our family knew the Lord. I became a Christian as a young adult at UCLA. And I want to tell you why I became a follower of Christ, why I became a Christian. And I'm going to make a general point, and then I'm going to make 2 specific points. And if you just remember the general point, this might be the biggest takeaway that you take away from our session today, all right? Because if you get this first point, it could save you a whole lot of grief as a follower of Christ in the way you approach your own convictions. And I'll tell you why I became a follower of Christ. I became a follower of Christ because Christianity was true. I don't mean Christianity was true for me. I don't mean that I liked it. I enjoyed it. I found something that really turned me on, that I thought was really great. I mean, sometimes those are true, but, you know, if you're a follower of Jesus, you know it isn't always great. It doesn't always turn you on. It isn't always fun. Sometimes it's hard. It's difficult. Those aren't the reasons. I became a follower of Christ because it was true not on the inside for me, but on the outside in the world. I became a Christian because it was true, like gravity is true. You can have really good days and really bad days, right? But gravity is still gravity because it's true according to the way the world actually is. And I want to give you a couple illustrations so just to make this point clear, because there's lots of confusion in our culture about this particular point, about what it means for something to be true, especially religious things to be true, and there's confusion even among Christians on this issue. A number of years ago, I spoke at UC San Diego, and they had a kind of a Christian week, and Campus Group had put this on, and they had a big auditorium, and they had a lot of students that would come in, and every night they'd have a different lecture. And I was there on a Wednesday night, and I was lecturing on philosophy, and I was doing a thing on relativism. And I was making the case from this philosophical point about the truth of Christianity. And before I started, though, we had dinner with the campus leaders, and I asked them, hey, what's a skinny on campus about Christians? What do they think about Christians? And they said, well, the students on campus think that Christians are stupid. I thought, oh, that's great. It's a good opener. I'll use that. And so I got introduced. I said to the audience, I understand you think that Christians are stupid. Well, some Christians are stupid. But some non-Christians are stupid too. So I don't know what that gets you. What I want to show you tonight, I told them, is that Christianity is not stupid. In other words, what I wanted to show them is, regarding the world as it actually is, Christianity can be true, even if some people who believe the truth aren't very smart. Even if I'm stupid, it doesn't change the truth about Christianity if it's true. And by the way, even if you're really, really smart and you reject Christianity, your smartness doesn't make Christianity false. It stands on its own. Now, I want you to think about this, and this is why I said a moment ago that this could really this could be a great takeaway for you, all right? If it turns out that Christianity is true on its own, apart from anything about me, then nothing about me can affect the truth of Christianity. I'm having a bad day. My prayers aren't getting answered the way I want them. Does that mean that God isn't real and that Christianity isn't true? No, it's true on its own merits, all right? If it is true, it's true on its own merits. I'm going to give you some reasons to think that's so in a moment. Sometimes people will challenge Christians. They say, you're a Christian because you were born in America. If you weren't born in America, an atheist will say this a lot. If you were born in America, you're a Christian, but if you were born in Saudi Arabia, you would be a Muslim. And humanly speaking, there's a point there. By the way, that challenge really shuts a lot of Christians down. It really shakes them up. Oh my goodness, you're right. Well, that may be true, all right? But what the atheist doesn't realize that if he were born in Saudi Arabia, he wouldn't be an atheist, right? So this cuts both ways, or better yet, it cuts neither way, because it doesn't matter where you were born or what psychological reasons you might have for believing something. If the thing is true, it's still true, regardless of the reasons psychologically, culturally, whatever, all right? And this is why when people raise issues like that, well, you believe in God because you need a crutch. He makes you feel better. Well, yes, lots of times he does. So what? What does that have to do with the truth of Christianity? What does anything about my internal states have to do with the reality of God? It doesn't. I could disappear, and God and Christianity could all still be true. This is the difference between something being subjectively true, true for the subject, true for the individual who believes it, and something being objectively true, true out there in the world. And this is why I use the illustration of gravity. You know, I think Christianity is like gravity. It's true out there. And if you think of gravity, it doesn't matter where you were raised or why you believe in gravity, and maybe you believe in gravity for a bunch of dumb reasons. It doesn't make gravity go away because you have dumb reasons to believe it. It's a fact of the world. And I became a follower of Christ in 1973 because I was convinced that what Christianity represented about the world, about the nature of reality, was a fact. And I want to give you, that's kind of my broader general point. If you can kind of break free from this cultural narrative that religious truth is just your truth, it's true for you, which to me doesn't make any sense when people say that. Because if it's true for you, what does that mean? That means you believe it. But just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true, right? And if what you believe isn't true, if it isn't a fact, then why are we calling it a truth? It's not any kind of truth. It may be a belief, it may be a falsehood, it may be a deception, but it's not any kind of truth. But this is the way the culture has taught us to talk about things like this, to relativize it and take it out of the realm of reality. Jesus had his feet firmly planted in reality. So did the apostles have their feet firmly planted in reality. And by the way, this is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, and some of you may be familiar with this passage, but he says, if Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead, then you should feel sorry for Christians. If they're just believing on a whim, on an emotion, if it's just their truth and the bones of Jesus are still in that grave, we should be, of all people, pitied, is what Paul says. Because he understood that his convictions about Jesus were about like gravity kind of thing, not an ice cream kind of thing, what he happened to prefer. So what I'm going to do, that's my first general point. That's the foundation I'm building everything else out. What I'm talking about here is not my personal faith beliefs. They are my beliefs, but they are beliefs about the nature of reality, okay? And if I'm wrong, then these beliefs are no kind of truth whatsoever. They're error. But I want to give you some reasons why I'm convinced the convictions that I have are actually matching up to reality. And I'm going to give you two particular things, but before that I wanted to say something of an introductory form to kind of put this in the right place, and so you're thinking about this correctly. I have two daughters. One is 17 and one is 14. And I know what you're thinking, like, that guy's an old guy, you know. He's got teenagers. How did that happen? I can't remember, but in any event, I do need prayer. I know that. But when my eldest daughter was about 8 years old, she said to me, Papa, why do we believe that God is true? Why do we believe that God is true? Okay? Now, we had already kind of given her some of the basics. She'd been baptized, etc., but the what question she had kind of in place. Now it was the why things that start coming out. And I was thinking for a moment, now this is what I do for a living. I explain to people these kind of things, but now it's my daughter, and she's 8. And so I'm thinking, how can I express this to her in a way that would make sense? And I'm just thinking about, all of a sudden this line came into my mind. And I told it to her because it really captured what I'm all about when I make the case for Christianity. And here's what I said to her. I said, honey, the reason that we believe God is true is because he's the best explanation for the way things are. The reason that we believe God is true is because he's the best explanation for the way things are. When we look at things in the world and we ask why things are the way they are, it turns out that the Christian understanding of reality fits the bill. It explains the way things are a whole lot better than a lot of other alternatives, other religions or non-religion, like atheism, for example. All right? And so what I like to do now is I like to give you two pieces of evidence that kind of fall into this broader category, okay? And that is evidences that depend not on my emotions or on my experience or even on my belief for them to be evidences of God. They are evidences outside of me, all right? Here's the first one, and I'll introduce it by just letting you know I was at an event and had a Q&A session afterwards, and I was offered a challenge. And the challenge was, prove to me that God exists. Now, if anybody says this to you, and this is often the way you'll be approached by an atheist, prove to me God exists, you're already at a disadvantage. And I mentioned it to the gentleman who raised the issue. I said, you say prove, but, I'm not entirely clear what would count as proof for you. And by the way, unless you clear that up with somebody, you can give all kinds of reasons all day long, and they'll say, yeah, but that's not what? Proof, right? And so they're just going to brush you off. So that's a liability of that kind of challenge. And I mentioned that. And I said, you also said, prove to me. So I don't know what your psychological state is that will persuade you with anything I offer. So can you reword the challenge? And he said, yeah, I guess I can. Can you give me any good reason to believe that God exists? I said, okay, I can work with that. Okay. I said, let me ask you a few questions, though, if you don't mind. All right? They're basic questions, but it'll help lay the stage for my response to you. So the first question that I asked him was, do you think, I know this is kind of crazy, but do you think things exist, right? Yeah, okay, got it. I agree with you. Now, the things that exist, whatever they are, have those things always existed? What do you think? Now, it turns out there's almost nobody who's thought about this for very long that thinks that everything that exists in the universe has always existed, that the universe is eternal. They think that the universe came into being at a certain point in time, okay? The Big Bang or whatever you want to call it, okay? And so that's what he said. He said, no, I don't think everything has always been here. I think that came into existence at a point in time, okay? And so I said, I agree with you too. I say we're both on the same page there. Okay, now this is the third question, and this is the most important question. What caused everything in the world to come into existence? What caused that? Now, I said, I'll make it easier on you. There's only two options. Something or nothing, all right? Very simple. Something or nothing. Now, the atheist who's challenging me does not want to say something, because the minute he says something caused the whole natural realm, he's outside of the natural realm, right? The minute he says that, he's got to acknowledge the existence of some other agent, some other power, who's got to be pretty bright, pretty powerful, pretty, incredible to be outside of the natural realm, to make the natural realm. But he doesn't want to go there. That's not his view. But if he rejects something, then what is he going to say? He's got only option left is that no thing caused everything to come into existence. Now, I don't even think that's possible. But even if it were possible, it ain't the odds-on favorite, right? So gals, you come home at night and you look in the garage and you see a brand new Mercedes XL in there. You say, hey, darling, where'd that new Mercedes XL come from? Dad says, sweetheart, it just popped into existence out of nothing. I know it sounds odd, but that's the way scientists believe that the universe came into existence. So, if it can happen to the universe, I don't know why it can't happen with a Mercedes SL. Are you going to buy that? No, because it ain't the odds-on favorite, right? And in the same way, the idea that nothing caused everything is not the odds-on favorite. That's not where the smart money is. Now, some of you have been around, have heard these kinds of arguments before. You might recognize this as a sophisticated name. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. Any cosmological argument is an argument for God based on the existence of the cosmos, all right? And this is one version. There's other versions. But it's a common sense notion. And here's the way I like to put it so it's really easy to understand. A big bang needs a big banger. Pretty straightforward, pretty commonsensical. And that's the idea. A big bang needs a big banger. Now, I want to show you why this is, I want to show you how, it seems obvious when I say it to you, but I think actually everybody has a common sense intuition that when you have an effect, like the beginning of the universe, you have to have a cause that is adequate to the effect, all right? Even atheists who deny the beginning of the universe, or at least deny the Creator as the beginning of the universe. And so I want to show you how they know better on this if they're not trying to defend their turf. I was at a dinner party once, a lot of religious people at the party. Father was a deeply religious man, and I was sitting across from his son at dinner, and his son, who is about 17 years old, announced to the dinner party that he didn't believe in God anymore, that he was an atheist, that belief in God was stupid, it was irrational, it was dumb, okay? Now, his dad's sitting right here, and all the rest of us are stunned because his father had never heard anything like that before. But he's 17 and he's got a real attitude, and he's really crabbing about it a lot. Now, I'm going to try to help out a little bit, and take some of the tension off and talk to this young man. And so I'm raising some of these issues with the young man, and he's just not going for it. He's not buying it, right? He's not. I said, wait a minute, what about the beginning of the universe? Doesn't the Big Bang need a big banger? And, he didn't, now that's all dumb, it's all stupid. That's all he kept saying, right? And then finally, I just thought I'd take one more shot and give it an illustration. We were sitting in the dining room, there was a smaller living room there, and then there's a front door there. And I said, if you were sitting here having dinner and you heard this over there at that door, what would you think? Would you think that the knock knocked itself? Or would you think someone is responsible for the knocking on the door, all right? And he, again, totally dismissive. So I figure I'm done. I did the best I could. Sometimes you don't get anywhere with these kinds of things. People don't want to listen. Then we had dessert. And as God is my witness, we're sitting there eating dessert, and over there across the room at the front door is, I am not joking, okay? He looks up from his dessert like this, and he goes, "Who's that?" And I said, "No one." But the key here is what he did. He got up and he opened the door because he didn't imagine that it was reasonable to think that the knock knocked itself. It turned out it was some of his friends coming to visit him, okay? So even in a certain sense, when atheists don't have their guard up, they do the common sense thing. They realize that effects have causes that are adequate to them. This is how science works. The best explanation for the way things are, that's how science works. I was actually working on a talk a number of years ago when I was in Poland, and there was a big conference with Christian leaders in Europe, and they don't get much training there, so a group of us had gone over. I didn't organize it. I was asked to go, and I was working on this point to lecture the next day on this particular point, and I was in Katowice, Poland, and I was in a hotel, and there's a lot of stuff going on. People are drinking and carrying on and having meals, and everything's going on fine, and I'm working on my my notes, and right at this point, the Big Bang part of my notes. And then while everything's happening, there's this big bang. Everything went dead silent. Especially nowadays, you wonder, what was that? But really, when you think, what was that? That wasn't the question people were asking. They were asking, what caused that? We know what it was. It was a big bang. Now, it turned out that somebody had been pumping up the inner tube for a wheelchair, and they pumped it up too much and it just exploded. So that's a pretty big bang, okay? And once they realized it was nothing nefarious, then on they went with the rest of their evening, But what was interesting about that moment is nobody would have said that bang banged itself. They were interested in what the cause of the bang was. And by the way, nobody would have said, if they were told, well, that noise, a pin dropped on the carpet, right? No, because that's not an adequate cause for the effect. The point I'm making here with this illustration is these are common sense notions. These are the kind of thing that we all have access to. And when we have the assessment of the smart people in the world that the universe is not eternal, but there was when the universe was not, and then it was, it is legitimate to ask what is an adequate cause for that. And no cause is not an adequate answer. It's not where the smart money is. But the minute you acknowledge there was a cause to the beginning of the universe, now you're in a whole different realm. Because it's going to have to be powerful, it's going to have to be smart, it's going to have to be an agent, a person, because only persons can initiate events like that. And you're getting pretty close to the G-O-D word, right? And that's exactly where we go. In other words, I cannot be an atheist if I willed myself to be one. Because I know too much. Because the atheist's explanation on this particular point for the origin of the universe is not adequate. It is not the best explanation for the way things are. So now I have one really big, solid, reliable, substantial reason to believe outside of my emotions, outside of my experience, outside of anything about me, that there is a God who has created the universe, which, by the way, is the way our story starts. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It fits perfectly with our story, okay? Okay, now I want to switch gears and just go to something completely different, another way of thinking about verification of a point of view, a Christian point of view here. And I want you to think about what we now call Good Friday, and this is just coming up in a few weeks, is that right? And I want you to think about that particular day, if you were there that day. Now, we think of the whole Easter weekend, and we call it Good Friday because we know what was accomplished on that day and then what was verified 3 days later. But on that day, it didn't seem good. It didn't seem good to anybody there. Because on that Friday night, there were no, poetic reflections on atonement. There were no, discussions about what happened on the cross and how God is able to provide forgiveness. No, it was just a bloody, brutally beaten corpse hanging on a cross. Jesus was dead, and he was taken down, and he was buried, and the women were weeping, and the men were hiding. And it was night, and it was day, and it was night again, and it all seemed over. That was the end of it. And then something happened. Something happened. Now, what happened is a matter of debate and has mystified historians. But I want to tell you, though, what the majority of historians do acknowledge about what happened that weekend. There are actually 4 things that I'm going to offer you. There are more than that, but I'm just making a simple case here, 4 things that they acknowledge. And when I say that most historians, I'm talking about virtually every single historian, Christian, secular, critical historian of that period of time, what they acknowledge from the primary source documentation that we find in what we call Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those historical documents, they view these as sound historical documents on the main. And they say, well, here's some things we know for sure from those records. We know that Jesus was crucified on a Roman cross. We know that. All right? He was dead. They killed him. The second thing we know is that after he was buried in a tomb, that tomb was empty 3 days later. Dead on Friday, gone on Sunday. We know that. We also know something else, that there were a whole bunch of people that said they saw Jesus, that said that they were totally convinced that they had seen Jesus after that Sunday. Okay? Now, they're not committing to what they saw, whatever. They are convinced that these people thought they saw Jesus. And the other thing that they know is that there was a guy named James who was a skeptic regarding Jesus, who became a believer in Jesus. This was actually Jesus' half-brother, James, who became a leader of the church and who died a martyr's death, incidentally. And another guy who was a persecutor of the church named Saul, who became Paul, and a believer in Jesus of Nazareth, and also died a martyr's death. He was beheaded on the Appian Way in Italy, okay, outside of Rome. So they all acknowledge we count on those things. We know Jesus died. We know Jesus, that the tomb was empty. We know these people said they saw Jesus, and we know these guys had their minds changed. A skeptic and a radical persecutor of the church, had their minds changed because they said they saw Jesus alive too. Okay. Now, given those basic historical facts that virtually every historian in the field agrees to, what is the best explanation for those different facts? That's the question. What is the best explanation? So let's just talk about the death of Jesus. And there's all kinds of theories that are going on. The reason that the tomb was empty is because Jesus never really died. Okay? He just kind of fainted. This is called the swoon theory. He fainted. He seemed to be dead, and then they put him in the grave, and then he got better. I mean, simply put, that's the way they see it. So let me understand this. You're suggesting that Jesus took all the physical abuse that's described in the historical accounts, which is the beating, the whipping, and then the crucifixion. All right? And by the way, this happened in April, probably. Cold, naked on the cross, all those hours, that he was run through his chest with a spear, that he was declared dead by Roman soldiers who were well acquainted with death, by the way. And this is another thing, we have very little exposure to dead bodies. Once a loved one dies, they go away, somebody else takes care of them. But those people took care of their own dead bodies. And once you die, the body starts to change very rapidly. Rigor mortis, for example, a bunch of other things. Are you saying that all of these people that were very familiar with death, not just the military people, but the family people who put Jesus' body in the grave and packed him with 70 pounds of herbs and spices, that was part of the process. It's right there in the record. Wrapped him all up, stuck him in a cold grave, and he just got better in a couple of days? Really? No, I don't think so. If you believe that, then you're not skeptical enough, frankly. All right, well, maybe somebody stole the body. Oh, okay, that's possible. Who? You got 3 groups. You got Romans, you got Jews, you got Christians, disciples. Okay, who's going to steal the body? The Jews aren't going to steal the body. They want Jesus dead, right? I asked my daughter this when she was young. We were kind of going over this. She said, yeah, what about the Romans? No, the Romans want Jesus dead too. There you go. Well, who's left? The disciples. Why would the disciples steal the body? After Jesus died, they ran and hid. They didn't believe this. And in fact, if they did steal the body, That means when they preached a resurrected Christ, they were lying and they knew it. Now, there's a lot of people who will die for a lie if they think the lie is truth. But there's very few people who are going to die for a lie when they know it's a lie. Okay? So here's the rule about lying. You want to tell a lie that helps you. You don't want to tell a lie that gets you tortured and beaten and crucified upside down and beheaded. That's not a good lie. All right? What was I thinking? You know. But every one of those disciples faced that outcome, and some of them suffered it because of their conviction that who they saw was really Jesus. No, this doesn't make sense that they would steal the body and as a group then just lie about it and suffer that kind of thing. Doesn't make sense. Well, I'll tell you what the most popular, some suggest, they went to the wrong tomb, you know. Well, this is very easy to fix. They go to the wrong tomb. Where's Jesus? He's risen. He's risen. No, he's not. He's right over there. And he stinks. You know? That doesn't make any sense either. I'll tell you what the going idea is right now, that the disciples were hallucinating, okay? They take seriously that the disciples saw something that they were convinced was Jesus, which is why they're willing to die. But it wasn't Jesus because dead people don't rise from the dead. That's their view. So what was going on? They must have had a hallucination. Okay, now I just want you to think about hallucinations. Maybe some of you have had these things before. But when you hallucinate, the thing that you're aware of in your hallucination is not out there, is it? It's in here, okay? It's what's called first-person private. Other people don't have access to your hallucinations, just like other people don't have access to your dreams. Your dreams are first-person private. They're in you, as it were. Nobody else can participate in that. And so imagine, for example, that you woke up in the middle of the night, gentlemen, and you had a great dream. You say, honey, wake up. I just had a great dream. Fall asleep with me, we'll hold hands, and we'll have the same dream together. Well, you're laughing because this doesn't work. That's not how it works. That's not how hallucinations work either. So you don't have people that have group hallucinations. Now, you can have a group of people that might be fooled because of some trick. And we had an illusionist as part of our event this last weekend. He was magnificent. And the things he did were like eye-popping. There, thank you so much. He was fabulous. But it's no magic. It was illusions. It was tricks, okay? But they were, so you can have whole groups of people that are tricked into thinking something that didn't happen. But that's not an illusion. That's a trick. That's not a hallucination. That's a trick. These people were not being tricked by anybody. They all thought they saw Jesus multiple times in multiple settings for longer periods of time. Jesus had meals with them, for goodness sake, in Jerusalem and in Galilee. Are we really to believe that what was going on here was a group hallucination? And by the way, do you guys know the difference between dreams and reality? Well, I suspect they did too. I do. You do. They probably did as well. When you look at the kinds of explanations that people give to explain away the details, the obvious implication of a dead Jesus, an empty tomb, appearances to disciples, and then two radical conversions, I should say, by James and especially by Saul of Tarsus. What best explains that? And in the final analysis, when you think no explanation fits the evidence better than the explanation given by those previously gutless disciples, those men who were there, knees knocking behind locked doors, now putting their lives on the line for this testimony. And that testimony was, he who was dead is now alive. So I want to ask you, what would transform a group of shivering, shaking men who had scattered, had abandoned Jesus, and someone at least denied that he ever knew Jesus, hiding from the authorities, doors locked, lights out, right? What could have transformed them into the vibrant witnesses for Jesus, standing in the face of those same authorities who had crucified Jesus and now were threatening them? Peter says, okay, I get it. You want to whip me? Go ahead. You want to throw me in prison? Go ahead. But we cannot stop speaking that which we have seen and heard. What would cause Saul of Tarsus, a man so dedicated to his religion that he rounded up men and women to have them beaten and executed because they proclaimed a risen Christ? What would cause such a man to turn on a dime and take his place with those he persecuted on Christ's behalf, eventually giving his own life for the very gospel he previously despised? What best explains that? And only one answer will do, in Peter's words, the one who had denied Christ. This Jesus, God raised up again, to which we all are witnesses. And if risen, then Jesus is the Son of God. He was declared with power to be the Son of God, according to the resurrection, Paul says in Romans chapter 1. And if he's risen, then we have been forgiven because he was delivered up for our transgressions and raised for our justification. You see, the resurrection proves that God's not mad at us anymore when we put our confidence in Christ. And if risen, there is therefore no condemnation, because he who is raised is at the right hand of the Father and making intercession for us constantly. So what have I done here? I've made a couple of points. I made a general point. And the general point is, I guess another way of putting it is, facts are stubborn things. If it can be demonstrated, in a sense, outside, as a fact of the world, that there is a God, which gets you theism, and Jesus rose from the dead, which gets you Christianity, then those things are true no matter what is going on inside of us. No matter what other motivations we have. Maybe we were raised in a Christian family. Maybe we were raised in a country where Christianity was the main religion. Maybe we have psychological needs for God. Maybe we're stupid. It's irrelevant. Because nothing about me or you makes or breaks Christianity. It stands on its own because of external details. And actually, if you get that, this could provide you a tremendous amount of safety from the wrong kinds of doubts about your convictions. And then I offered two different pieces of information substantiated by good thinking that we should believe in God and that we should believe that Jesus rose from the dead as the best explanation for the way things actually are. And if those are solid ways of thinking about things, then Christianity is true. And I just gave you two. If you were here this weekend, you got more stuff. You got a lot of stuff that had to do with cultural circumstances, and cultural challenges that we talked about, tough things that Christians are facing, especially young people. But when you have the confidence that you are standing on solid ground, that makes all the difference in the world. What Stand to Reason is here for as an organization is to help local churches like you guys and others in the country, and we do this, actually this is our 5th of the series. We do 6 a year like this, different parts of the country. We kind of box the compass. I kind of joke a little bit that Philly was as far north as we could get towards New England and still find Christians. But we are thrilled to be here. Our goal is to give confidence for every Christian, clear thinking for every challenge, and courage and grace for every encounter. We want to build ambassadors for Christ. This way, I invite you to go to str.org, maybe look at the book table or something like that, so that we can do our part to help build you up. But at the end of the day, the reason that I'm most confident, regardless of what happens to me in my life, my circumstances, my relationship with God, up, down, just like you guys, no different, Christianity still remains the best explanation for the way things are. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this fabulous weekend to be with these great people, to be able to talk about things that really matter, to be able to encourage each other, to give reasons, to give answers, to build confidence in our brothers and sisters in Christ, to face a tough world. It's pushing back really hard. I pray for this congregation, for Lee and the rest of the leadership, Father, the great way that they're building up the body here in this church. Pray we would continue to let this church be a light to this community, and that we would all be strong in the midst of the challenges that we face here, in our public lives out there, in our personal lives as well, to be faithful to you in all things, so that we would hear finally at the end, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what we desire, Lord. Help us to do that. Live a life that will result in that, for your glory, for your sake. Amen.